Hey everybody, Cliff Ravenscraft here from podcastanswerman.com and gspn.tv. Today I'm going to be talking about iTunes redirect. It happens to be one of my very least favorite things to do as a podcast consultant, and it's when somebody calls me up and says, I need help transferring my feed from one place to the other without losing any of my iTunes subscribers. And so therefore, you know, they've set up their RSS feed, and they basically either sent like a Podbean RSS feed or a Blogger RSS feed, and now they're switching from one service over to another for their website, and their RSS feed's going to change, and now all of a sudden everybody in iTunes is subscribed to the Blogger feed or the Podbean feed, and now all of a sudden there's this issue where their feed is kind of like held hostage by the old service. So there are some services out there that when you are subscribed, you know, when you have services with them providing your podcasting RSS feed, that they will do an iTunes redirect for you if you request it. It's not very difficult for them to do. So when they tell you that it's not possible, they're not being honest with you. You know, I just, matter of fact, one of the things that I will do is I'm actually going to go in here and type in hostage, okay, and that in Podcast Answer Man. And I'd encourage you to check out episode number 200 of Podcast Answer Man, What to Do When Your RSS Feed is Held Hostage. Again, this is episode number 200 of Podcast Answer Man, and just go up to my search bar and do a search for hostage, and you'll find it, episode 200. And this is what to do when you can't do an iTunes redirect, all right? But if you can do one, then we're going to talk about that option here. So here's the scenario. I have a client. His name is Chad, and he happens to have a podcast. He happens to be a pastor who has a podcast for his church, and he actually uses a service called Podcast Maker. It's actually a piece of software that's available for the Mac. It's called Podcast Maker, and it allows you to create a podcast RSS feed and actually create a podcast altogether with just access to FTP. And you just put in the link to the MP3 file, you put some notes into the software, and by golly, it FTPs all that information, including your podcast.xml RSS feed, right up to your web host, and by golly, you have a full-blown podcast feed ready for iTunes, ready to go. Now, here's the situation. My client actually has his RSS feed at faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. And this happens to be currently hosted at, let's call this web host A. All right. Now, the thing is, though, is the church has hired somebody to do a new website for them. And rather than using WordPress or something like that, they've decided to use something else that I had not heard of before. And if I just take off this /podcast.xml, you'll see that it actually forwards to faithharvest.publishpath.com. All right, and this is some kind of content management system, makes it very easy for them to get in and change things and stuff like that. And I personally probably would have recommended WordPress, but you know, hey, the situation is that they have already paid for this, and so now they need to get faithharvest.com to you know, pull up this site, but not say faithharvest.publishpath.com. They just wanted to say faithharvest.com. The problem is as soon as they set up the CNAME to forward over here, it broke it so that the podcast feed, you know, there is no, basically what a CNAME will do is it will actually say, you know what, faithharvest.com equals faithharvest.publishpath.com. All right. And so therefore it would be faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. And this is what would happen when you go to search for the RSS feed on this publish path server or web host B. All right. It does not exist. All right. Now, the first thing that I would have recommended is like, okay, well, that's not a problem. Let's just get FTP access and let's go ahead and just upload your podcast.xml, you know, right on into this this main directory here. And as long as you put podcast.xml and change your FTP information in your Podcast Maker software to upload into this publish path hosting B server, then everything will be fine. Well, here's the thing. We did get FTP access. However, this is what happens. If you go to what would be faithharvest.com/websites/faithharvest/cliff.png. This is where I uploaded a file into the root directory of what they give us access to. So we cannot jump into this directory. We can't even jump into this directory. And so what we need is we need to actually be able to take this cliff.png or podcast.xml and put it here, so that it actually shows up to where it will be faithharvest.publishpath.com/podcast.xml. But we don't have access to that. The publish path system does not just give you access to it. So we have to come up with another solution. What do we do? So he's got all of these people who are subscribed to, faithharvest.podcast.xml. Here's my recommendation. All right. First and foremost, let me explain to you. Let me go over here and talk about, Feedburner. Typically what I would do is I would actually have done this to where, for example, this is, podcast. This would be faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. And let's see here. And we're just going to leave this as my construction podcast. All right. So I'm going to just go ahead and do save feed. All right. And it says faithharvest.com does not seem to exist. So let's do this again. We'll just type this in again. It is Faith Harvest. I think I missed a letter there, the R or something. Podcast.xml. All right, so let's go ahead and hit Save Changes here. And then I'm going to go down and hit Troubleshoot Ties, and I'm going to resync this feed. All right. Now, if I hit here and click there, you can see that it says Faith Harvest, Chad Budlong. It's got his artwork there, and by golly, it's got all of his podcast episodes. All right. So what happened was, let's just say that we want to move his RSS feed to a completely different location. I mean, this is how easy it should be. It should be easy enough to go in here to say faithharvest.com/websites/faithharvest/ and then podcast.xml. If we did that, then by golly, we could just hit save feed. Everybody who is subscribed to this RSS feed right here would have the ability to subscribe. They wouldn't have any change at all, or they wouldn't know anything changed. We're just changing where everything starts from, the original feed. All right. So we can't do that, unfortunately. So what we have done, what I will do for my client, I'm actually waiting to get in touch with his web guy who has all the access to be able to get into FTP and stuff. So I'm not able to do that for him. So let me explain to you what I am going to do. First and foremost, what I did is I sent an email to myself. All right. I sent him an email to myself with the link to faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. Now that I have that, I'm going to hit save link as. All right, and it's going to ask me if I want to save it. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and by golly, check this out. I now have right here podcast.xml. All right, now before I do anything else, the next thing I want to do is I want to duplicate that file. So I have a backup of it because we're going to be making some changes to it, and I want to make sure I don't completely mess up his RSS feed. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to let you know that as soon as we get things set up, we're going to create a different domain on his old hosting account because he's going to keep his old hosting because that's where all of his email addresses and everything else are. So they're going to keep their web host A. They just wanted to use the new website that's over on web host B. So they're going to keep their old server. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up this thing called chadbudlong.com. And we're going to actually change it to where we're going to put his podcast.xml file in chadbudlong.com/podcast.xml. So basically, if you can imagine, we're just going to go in here and do chadbudlong.com/podcast.xml. And of course, the feed would actually be feeds.feedburner.com/faithharvest. Now, of course, this is my account, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up and just show you that we've already done some of this work. So if we go to, actually it's going to be feeds.feedburner.com, and let's go in here and do Faith Harvest. All right. So if I do that, well, looky there. We have an RSS feed at feeds.feedburner.com/faithharvest. So it's already there. All right. Everything is all set up. This is his podcast. Everything's good to go. The thing is, though, is people are still subscribed to faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. Now, here's the situation. Let me show you what happens in iTunes right now. All right. So we got my client here, and I'm not subscribed to any podcast at all in here for demonstration purposes. And I go to the iTunes store and I do a search for Faith Harvest podcast, and I find it and I hit subscribe. All right. So now it's subscribing to that podcast and it's downloading it. Now, the thing is this is the iTunes directory, and the iTunes directory is pulling all of this information here from the RSS feed that the church had submitted to iTunes, which is faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. And the reason I know this is because if I go over to podcasts where I just subscribed to this, and then I click on here, you can see that it's currently downloading that episode. And if I click here, there's a little I over description when I have the podcast highlighted. I click the inspector here, and it tells me this is the Faith Harvest podcast, and it is faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. All right, so that's the thing. This is what the iTunes store, when I click subscribe, it's what the iTunes store is looking at. And not only is it what the iTunes store is looking at, but it's also what they make me subscribe to when I become a subscriber. So every time I go and hit update podcast, it goes and sees if there's anything new. And you can see here, it still says faithharvest.com/podcast.xml, because it's just going to stay subscribed until there's something that tells it not to subscribe to that one anymore. I can keep hitting update, and I can hit update, and it keeps updating to see anything's new, and it's still faithharvest.com/podcast.xml. Now, again, I told you I do not currently have access to his server, so I'm going to delete this podcast. All right. And one of the things that I'm going to do, I've created a temporary account right here. You can see this is my FTP account, and I've got podcastanswerman.com, and I created a folder called Faith Harvest. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to grab that RSS or that podcast RSS feed, and I'm going to move that over into my own hosting account. All right. So now podcast.xml, the same one that I downloaded from his server, is now on my website, so that I can actually go to, all right, I'm going to go to http://podcastAnswerman.com/faithharvest/podcast.xml. All right, so I'm going to pull that up, and by golly, it didn't even look like it changed, but it did. I've got really fast internet access here. So you can see this is where I just uploaded it. So this is podcastanswerman.com/faithharvest/podcast.xml. So for just a moment, let's pretend that this is what iTunes has for the church, for the podcast. Let's pretend that this is what everybody is subscribed to in iTunes. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that URL for the podcast feed. I'm going to go ahead and open iTunes back up. All right. And I'm going to go to advanced, subscribe to a podcast. All right. And I'm going to paste in, podcastanswerman.com/faithharvest/podcast.xml. Easy for me to say a million times over and over again. All right. You'll notice this looks exactly like what it looked like before when I had subscribed in iTunes. I just manually subscribed to a different feed this time, but it's going to give you the same. You can see here in about 19 seconds, it'll be finished downloading that. But watch what happens when I click the inspector here. You'll notice that it still says this is the podcast I'm subscribed to, but what feed am I subscribed to? I'm subscribed to podcastanswerman.com/faithharvest/podcast.xml. Well, the thing is let's just pretend that this is what all of the subscribers are subscribed to. Let's pretend this is what iTunes has in the directory. How can we get iTunes and all of the current subscribers in iTunes to actually be subscribed to the Feedburner address. Well, this is where it comes in handy to know about the iTunes redirect code. So if you go to apple.com/iTunes/podcasts/specs.html, then you can actually, if I get that off of there, you can see that it'll take me to the top of the page. And there's this thing over here about changing your feed URL. All right. Now, of course, there's all kinds of information here, but there's this thing. It says you can grab this code here, this iTunes new feed URL, copy that. And what you want to do is you want to add this little tag. This is all it takes is this little tag in your RSS feed. And this is when you have that Podbean and those people at Podbean are telling you that, no, that can't be done. It can be done. It's this easy. Watch. So I'm going to my podcast.xml file. Remember, I'm not changing anything until I have this duplicate copy. So I have a backup just in case I mess everything up. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to open this with my favorite text editor. And I'm going to tell it, yes, let's go ahead and open it. All right. And so right here it is, podcast.xml. And you can see that it's got some information in here about the podcast RSS feed. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this right under the author. All right. I think you could put it in a bunch of different places as long as it's up in this tags area up at the top. But for me, this is where I know it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go right here and I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to paste in that code that I got right off of the iTunes store site for the specs page. And I'm going to paste it in twice because I need an open tag, and then I need to put a slash in front of this one so that it has the close tag. In between those two tags, I need to put the RSS feed that I want it to redirect to. So I'm going to type in http://feedburner.com/faith-harvest. All right. So it's open tag. All right. And I'm going to get rid of that space in there. And I don't think it makes, matter of fact, it doesn't make all that much difference at all. But anyway, right here. So right under the iTunes author, it's iTunes:"new-feed-URL" in a tag. Then the URL of the feed that we want iTunes to pick up. And then it's /iTunes:"new-feed-URL." So that closes that tag out. Now what I'm going to do is I am simply going to, actually I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command S, and that saves that file. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to open it up again, and I'm going to, this time I will open it up in, do I have text edit in here? I don't have text edit right there. So I'll tell you what, I'm just going to open it up again here, and you're going to see that it still has that feed in there. So I just wanted to make sure that it is in fact changed. So I'm going to open up my FTP program again. Here we are, public. This is my podcastanswerman.com/faith-harvest. You'll remember right here, you'll see that in iTunes, again, I am subscribed to podcastanswerman.com/faith-harvest/podcast.xml. Watch this. If I right click here and update this podcast to see if there's anything new, nothing new. I click right here. I'm still subscribed to podcastanswerman.com/faith-harvest.xml. Now here's where the magic happens. I'm going to minimize that for just a second. Now this is the XML file, podcast.xml. I just added the tag. I'm going to drag it over here, and it's going to say, wait a second, there's already a file here with that name. And what I want to do is I want to tell it, yes, I want to overwrite it and hit continue. And remember, I do have a backup copy just in case I messed everything up. All right, so now I've just updated it, and the only thing that's different is this podcast.xml has that little iTunes URL redirect code in there. Now, I go to iTunes. I right-click. Well, actually, before I right-click, let me just show you. I go here. I click the information button, the little inspector, podcastanswerman.com/faith-harvest/podcast.xml. I right-click. I click Update Podcast. And this is what will happen every single time anybody who is subscribed to that old RSS feed, when it goes to check for a new episode, this is what will happen. Look, what am I subscribed to now? Feeds feed.feedburner.com/faithharvest. That's right. I just changed the URL of what it's subscribed to. In fact, I mean, if you want to get fancy, what I could do is I could actually open this up and just to show you just how crazy we could get, we can open this up and I say, well, actually, what if I wanted to change this to feeds.feedburner.com/GSPN? All right. So I want to take everybody who's subscribed to Faith Harvest /podcast.xml, and I want to redirect them to somebody else. And so what'll happen here is I'm going to hit File Save. I'm going to close that. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I need to actually delete this. I know that I'm confusing you now, aren't I? Anyway, I'm going to bring in the copy. All right, this is the one that has the original code. There's no iTunes redirect in here. And I'm just going to rename that to podcast.xml. All right. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this podcast as though it does not exist. I am going to go to Advanced, Subscribe to Podcast, and I'm going to say I want to subscribe to Faith Harvest /podcast.xml. And by golly, there it is, right? And if I click the information here, I am subscribed to podcastanswerman.com/faithharvest /podcast.xml. All right. So now, remember, I added code, that says, hey, I want to change everybody who subscribed to that podcast. I want it to go to the GSPN. I want it to go to Cliff Ravenscraft GSPN Production Network. All right. So what's going to happen now is I take that, I overwrite that file. All right. I click continue. And by golly, now, if I go in here, I right click on this, you'll see something really interesting happen. Boom. It changed that subscription altogether. It's now the gspn.tv all-inclusive feed. I click here and it's now subscribed me to feeds.feedburner.com/gspn. You see, that's what the iTunes redirect code will do, is it will do that. So again, that's not what I want to do. And you'll notice it still keeps the old episodes that were there, by the way. Those old episodes didn't disappear, but it did get rid of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one more time. All right. We're going to get rid of this, delete it. I'm going to bring in the copy again. This is, again, the unaltered copy of this file. All right. I am going to go right here, and it's podcast.xml. I am going to go to iTunes. All right. I'm going to Advanced, Subscribe to Podcast. I am subscribing to this podcast. Chad Budlong. There we go. I am clicking Information. Boom. I am subscribed to Faith Harvest /podcast.xml. All right. I am going to go into this file, opening it with my text Wrangler software. I've probably called it Text Expander a couple times. I meant Text Wrangler. Anyway, I'm changing this to feeds.feedburner.com/Faith Harvest. All right, just want to make sure I get that right. I'm going to hit save. And the reason why I'm changing all of this back is because I'm going to send this XML file over to my pastor and ask him to have his web guy go ahead and update that so they can start switching over as many people as possible. All right, so now I am going to go ahead and close that again. I'm going to, let's see here. I am subscribed. Okay, yep. So I'm already subscribed. I'm now going to go to podcast.xml. I'm going to drag that over. I'm going to hit continue. And here we go. We're going to, again, check this. It should still be podcastanswerman.com/faithharvest/podcast.xml. Right click, update. Boom. It should now be Feedburner, feeds.feedburner.com/faithharvest. So now if I send this podcast.xml file, the one that I edited, that forwards it to this feed, and I say, hey, have your web guy replace the podcast.xml file that you currently have with this one, and you're good to go. And so at least until we create some of the other things, we still have to work on a couple things for him. But for him, this is going to immediately. So basically what will happen is, as people refresh their podcast episode, or as they click an update, or, in settings, there's the opportunity to do this every hour, every day. It'll automatically refresh, or when people fire up to iTunes the next time, it's going to try to check and find that podcast.xml file on Faith Harvest /podcast.xml. We leave this thing up for maybe 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, most people are going to have their podcast RSS feed updated, and then of course iTunes within 2 weeks. Certainly, the iTunes store. Basically, every 12 hours or so, every 12 to 18 hours, they're going to check the RSS feed, and they're also going to change as soon as the iTunes store goes to look for new information again. It's actually going to see that the RSS feed has changed, and it's immediately going to change it to where people subscribe. It's going to subscribe them to the Feedburner feed as well. So everybody from that future point on will be subscribed. So this is the iTunes redirect, and hopefully that is helpful to some of you. It's not fun by any stretch of the imagination, and I just want to let you know that if you need more assistance or anything like that, you can go to podcastanswerman.com. If I scroll down here, you'll see a bunch of different things here. I'm just looking. As of the recording of this, I have 224 hours worth of free information just like this. Check out podcastanswerman.com. Of course, sometimes I have free webinars. I have Podcasting A to Z, a 4-week training program where I'll teach you everything you need to know about podcasting. Not only that, but you have access to ask me questions for 4 weeks, and I'll answer every question you post. It's amazing. And of course, I do have my mailing list down here as well, where you can be notified of new training materials just like this. My friends, this is the iTunes redirect. It's how you do it. In the future, if you ever need it, go to podcastanswerman.com/iTunes redirect. God bless you all. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, I encourage you to join the community.